Taoiseach, there's a lot of uncertainties with the COVID pandemic, particularly now with the Delta variant, uncertainty about whether we can win the race in terms of vaccination to get ahead of this variant and ensure that things don't go into reverse and that we get plunged into lockdowns or more people get sick and go to hospital. It's still unclear whether the rise in the Delta variant, given where we are at in the vaccination programme, will lead to higher levels of hospitalisation or sickness, ICU or indeed fatality. But there is one thing that we pretty much do know now, and that is the more people who are vaccinated, the better protected we are, and the less likely it would be that variants will undermine all the progress that has been made. And we know that is not just true here, but critically it's true on a global level. Even if we get to the point we need to get, and we're not there yet in terms of having sufficient numbers of people vaccinated, that if huge swathes of the world do not have access to the vaccines, more variants will develop, and those variants will come back here and Europe and other places, even though they may be vaccinated. So the question of vaccine supplies, both for here and globally, is critical if we're going to get beyond this grim, depressing pandemic. And there is a very significant movement that has been calling, particularly on the European Union, to waive the intellectual property rights and patents that the big pharmaceutical vaccine-producing companies are using to protect their profits. And this is a serious problem. The European Parliament has now voted by a majority to say those intellectual property restrictions and patents should be removed, and that the vaccine-producing companies should be forced to share the technology to produce the vaccines with anybody who can produce it across the world. And let's be clear, it is profit that is stopping them doing that. Pfizer is making an 80% markup on the doses of its vaccine because it wants to protect the money it's making. That is not acceptable. In fact, it is immoral when some of the poorest countries in the world have less than 1% of the population vaccinated. So we need to use every single bit of capacity globally to produce vaccines if we are going to defeat this pandemic and come out of this miserable situation that we've been in for the last year and a half. And yet the European Commission, and it's not clear what your government are saying, are not committing to that position.
Thank you,
to the people's vaccine. There's a meeting of the WTO on the 14th of July, and I want to know, my question is, what is the government's position, and will they call for the people's vaccine, which is being supported by Mike Ryan and the World Health Organization, to allow the sharing of vaccine technology to increase the supplies of vaccines globally to all those who need them?
Taoiseach.
Through the Chair, I would say, that the Deputy has raised an important issue in respect of the need for a global vaccination programme that's effective and efficient. I don't think the solution offered by the Deputy is the correct one, and I think it's simplistic and it just in itself would not generate the additional supplies of vaccines. I also think the Deputy should acknowledge that of all the blocs across the world, the European Union has been the most open, the most effective and efficient in terms of vaccine production and exporting vaccines across the world. There have been no export bans in Europe, which has facilitated countries all over the world's capacity to get vaccines. You never acknowledge that. It's always attack, attack, attack through the Chair, attacking the Commission, attacking governments. But the reality is, Europe has been to the fore, and we should acknowledge and celebrate Europe's achievement, both in terms of the procurement of vaccines, the pre-purchase agreements which gave funding, which was an important factor in getting vaccines produced within 12 months. The intellectual property is important in terms of the advancement of science and research. It shouldn't be dismissed as easily as you dismiss it. It's extremely important. Technology transfer is important. Know-how is important. And the European Union has pledged $1 billion to Africa to develop manufacturing capacity, develop manufacturing know-how, to facilitate technology transfer. I would argue that the European Union's Commission's response, and indeed the European Council, because I'm part of that, and the country is a more intelligent, sensible than the sloganeering of let's just wave and do trips and so on like that. The sloganeering doesn't cut it here when in terms of increased production of vaccines. Just doesn't cut it. It's ideologically fine, pure, all the rest of it doesn't cut it. Now, it does, to be fair, the issue of global vaccination is absolutely essential if we're to deal with variants and get on top of this disease. But I think we've got to support know-how in certain locations across the world. And Europe, I think, has made a very solid contribution in terms of Africa. In terms of the WTO, we're also engaging in the proposal at the TRIPS Council in terms of initiatives and in terms of trying to reach a sensible sort of working compromise that would get vaccines to the countries concerned at low and countries with low income and middle incomes, and I think Europe has been constructive in that regard. It's all about production capacity. As I said, we've announced $1 billion from the European Union in terms of building production capacity in Africa. That will give us long-term production capacity in Africa. The United States government.
Time is up.
Sorry.
Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Okay, this business of sort of attack the opposition, accuse them of sloganeering really just has to stop, right? I don't think you'd accuse Mike Ryan of being a left-wing sloganeer, but he's supporting the people's vaccine. Médecins Sans Frontières are supporting the people's vaccine. UNAIDS are supporting the people's vaccine. Many of the countries who suffered the consequences of the refusal of big pharmaceutical companies to, for years, share the combination therapies to deal with AIDS and HIV, until they were forced to back down by a popular movement that demanded those intellectual property rights and patent restrictions were removed, which helped us actually get on top of AIDS. And they are saying the situation is exactly the same here. And let's be clear, when you say compromise, why do the big vaccine-producing companies not want to share the technology? Tell me why. And we all know the answer. They don't want to share the technology with other places that have the capacity to produce vaccine because it was impinge on their profits. And let's remember, it was public money with those advance orders to the order of €6 billion that actually paid for the development of those vaccines. That's how they were able to do it. So it was public money who paid for it, and public health and defeating the pandemic should come ahead of the profit hunger of these big vaccine producers, and you should take a clear position in calling for the TRIPS waiver to be introduced.
We have taken a position. We've taken a sensible position to get vaccines produced in greater volumes. Waiving intellectual property tomorrow morning won't do that. Won't do it. Do you know anything about pharmaceutical production? This country does know a thing or two about it. It's about sharing technology. It's about sharing capacity and know-how to get these through the chair, to get these vaccines produced. We are doing it, and the European Union is doing it. It's pledged $1 billion to increase manufacturing production in Africa. It's cooperating with the WTO and the TRIPS initiative to get a sensible outcome around expansion of production and facilitating an equitable access. There was discussions around here at the beginning of the year about the lack of enhanced production within Europe itself. But Europe set about getting its house in order, increased production significantly. We're now doing RNA development substance in Dublin, which is important. Countries that know how to do this fast should do more and more faster. Some of those countries you were talking about were offered vaccines at cost and refused at the beginning of the pandemic.
Thank you very much. The time is up.
There's leadership issues too in some of these countries too, which we need to face up to.